At 0902 on February 19th, 1945, Corporal Tony Stein hit the black volcanic sand of Iwo Jima carrying a weapon that did not officially exist. The weapon weighed 23 pounds. It looked like something assembled in a scrapyard by a mechanic with too much time and not enough regulations. An aircraft machine gun bolted to a Garand rifle stock with a Browning automatic rifle bipod on the front. A 100-round ammunition box hanging off the side. A crude trigger welded to the firing mechanism. Nothing about it was standard issue. Everything about it was going to save lives. Stein was with Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. His landing craft hit Green Beach at the base of Mount Suribachi exactly on schedule. The ramp dropped. Stein and 30 other Marines pushed forward into water that came up to their thighs. The weight of their equipment pulled at them. Rifles, ammunition, grenades, entrenching tools, gas masks, rations. Every Marine carried 60 to 80 pounds of gear. They waded toward shore. 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. Still no enemy fire. That was wrong. The naval bombardment had been pounding the island for 3 days. 74 days before that, carrier aircraft had been hitting Japanese positions. Intelligence said the defenses would be softened. Intelligence had never been more wrong. The Japanese had built 18 kilometers of tunnels beneath the island, reinforced concrete bunkers with walls 6 feet thick, artillery positions hidden in caves with interlocking fields of fire covering every meter of beach, 320mm spigot mortars, hidden machine gun nests camouflaged so perfectly you could walk past them without seeing the firing ports, 21,000 Japanese soldiers commanded by Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who had studied every American amphibious landing since Guadalcanal and designed his defenses specifically to kill Marines in the most efficient way possible. Kuribayashi had ordered his men to hold fire until the beaches were crowded with Marines. Let them land. Let them think the bombardment worked. Then kill them all at once. The Marines advancing across that beach carried M1919A 6 machine guns. The A6 was the infantry variant of the Browning M1919, modified with a shoulder stock, bipod, and carrying handle so one Marine could theoretically operate it alone. In reality, the M1919A6 weighed 32 pounds empty. Add the ammunition belt and you were carrying close to 50 pounds. It fired 30 .06 rounds at 400 rounds per minute. When a Marine squad hit a Japanese pillbox, they needed overwhelming firepower delivered immediately. The Browning automatic rifle gave them 20 rounds at 550 rounds per minute. Good for short bursts. Not enough for sustained suppression. The M1919A6 gave them sustained fire but was too heavy to maneuver quickly in assault. What Marines needed was something that combined the portability of the bar with firepower that could actually suppress a fortified position long enough for demolition teams to get close with satchel charges and flamethrowers. The Japanese bunkers on Iwo Jima had firing ports 11 inches wide. The concrete walls absorbed machine gun fire. You could shoot at them all day with a bar or an M1919 and accomplish nothing except wasting ammunition and telling every Japanese soldier exactly where you were. The problem had been identified 16 months earlier on a different island by a Marine sergeant who refused to accept that the weapons he had were the only weapons he could have. Sergeant Milan Grevich from Mountain Iron, Minnesota, was a paratrooper with the 3rd Marine Parachute Battalion. The Paramarines were an elite unit formed in 1940 to test the concept of Marine parachute infantry. They trained at Camp Gillespie in California with rigorous physical conditioning, parachute training, advanced weapons instruction, and small unit tactics. The Paramarines never made a combat jump. The Marine Corps decided parachute operations were not practical in the Pacific Island campaigns, but the training created exceptionally capable infantry. In November 1943, the 3rd Parachute Battalion landed at Empress Augusta Bay on Bougainville as part of the 3rd Marine Division's assault. Bougainville was a jungle nightmare. Dense vegetation, swamps, hills. The Japanese defenders used the terrain expertly with ambushes from concealed positions, machine gun fire from camouflaged bunkers, and infiltration attacks at night. The Marines needed more firepower than their standard weapons could deliver. Grevich noticed something sitting on the beach after the initial landing. Aircraft machine guns, NM-2 Browning machine guns, 30 caliber, salvaged from wrecked Navy aircraft, probably from SBD Dauntless dive bombers that had crashed or been shot down. The ANM-2 was an aviation variant of the M1919, lightened for aircraft use with a thinner barrel and finely machined parts with weight reduction cutouts. Rate of fire increased to 1,200 rounds per minute, 3 times faster than the ground version. The high cyclic rate was necessary for aerial combat where engagement windows were measured in seconds. The problem was the ANM-2 had spade grips designed for aircraft mounting. You could not carry it and maneuver with it the way Marines needed to fight. Private William Colby from Gloversville, New York, tried a field modification. He attached a bipod to the muzzle of an ANM-2. It was crude but functional. 2 days after the Bougainville landing, Japanese soldiers ambushed his squad during a patrol. Colby deployed the modified gun. His assistant gunner, Private Edward Crumlish from Wilmington, Delaware, fed the belt. The high rate of fire drove the Japanese back. 1,200 rounds per minute sounded like a continuous roar. The Japanese soldiers who had been advancing aggressively went to ground. They stopped shooting. They took cover. The few seconds of suppression was enough for Colby's squad to maneuver and break contact. Colby's modification worked, but it was crude. The gun still had spade grips, still awkward to aim, still mounted on an aircraft cradle that made it heavy and cumbersome. It needed refinement. Grevich saw what Colby had done and took it further. His platoon leader was Lieutenant Philip Gray from Jewell, Oregon. Gray understood weapons. Together they designed a more extensively modified version. They attached an M1 Garand rifle buttstock so you could shoulder the weapon like a rifle. Added a bar bipod for stability when firing prone. Mounted a bar rear sight for aiming with adjustments for windage and elevation. They fabricated a proper trigger mechanism. The aircraft gun used an electrical solenoid activated by a button on the spade grips. That worked fine in an aircraft where the gun was rigidly mounted. It did not work for a shoulder-fired weapon. Grevich and Gray created a mechanical trigger that connected to the solenoid. Pulling the trigger closed an electrical circuit. The solenoid fired the gun. Simple, effective. The result was something you could actually carry and shoot like a rifle while delivering 1,200 rounds per minute. They called it the Stinger. The name came from its effect. That rate of fire had quite a sting. One Marine with a Stinger could put more rounds downrange than 3 Marines with bars. Grevich and Gray finished their prototype on Bougainville but never used it in combat there. The fighting was mostly over by the time they completed the weapon. The 3rd Parachute Battalion returned to the United States in early 1944. The Marine Corps disbanded the Paramarines on February 29, 1944. All personnel were reassigned to regular Marine units. Grevich was sent to the newly formed 5th Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California. He was assigned to the machine gun section of G Company, 28th Marine Regiment. The 5th Division was being built from scratch specifically for future operations. Training was intense with live fire exercises, amphibious assault practice, combined arms coordination, unit cohesion drills, and physical conditioning. As Grevich trained with his new unit through the spring and summer of 1944, he became increasingly frustrated with the M1 919A6 machine guns they were issued. They were too slow, too heavy, too cumbersome for the kind of close assault work Marines would face against fortified Japanese positions. Every island in the Pacific had shown the same pattern. Japanese defenses were getting stronger, more concrete, more tunnels, more preparation time. Taking those positions required getting close with demolitions and flamethrowers. Getting close required suppressive fire. The M1919A6 was not adequate for that mission. Grevich remembered the Stinger he had built on Bougainville. In November 1944, the 5th Marine Division moved to Hawaii. They established Camp Tarawa on the Big Island. Training intensified. The target was still classified, but everyone knew it was coming soon. Grevich decided this was the time. He approached his company commander with a proposal. He wanted permission to build improved machine guns using salvaged aircraft weapons. He explained the concept, showed calculations on rate of fire and weight, described how a prototype had worked on Bougainville. The company commander was skeptical but interested. Higher firepower for less weight sounded good. The problem was procurement and authorization. Where would Grevich get the aircraft machine guns? Where would he get the parts to modify them? Grevich said he would handle it. Do not ask too many questions. The company commander thought about it. His Marines were going to assault a heavily fortified island. If some sergeant wanted to build better weapons using spare parts and scrap metal, maybe that was worth overlooking regulations. He gave Grevich approval, quietly, unofficially. Grevich went to work. He found salvaged A and M2 machine guns. Aircraft mechanics on Hawaii had access to aircraft graveyards. Damaged planes were cannibalized for parts. Sometimes parts disappeared before official disposition. Nobody asked too many questions about where a sergeant got surplus aircraft weapons in the middle of a war. His assistant was Private First Class John Little. Years later, Little would say about the parts, "I do not recall how or where we got them." That was probably the safest answer. Grevich and Little worked at Camp Tarawa while the 5th Division prepared for deployment. They built 6 complete Stingers. Each one required precise work. Remove the spade grips from the aircraft gun, attach an M1 Garand buttstock modified to fit the aircraft gun's receiver, metalwork with files and hand tools, make it solid, make it straight. The stock had to absorb recoil without cracking. Mount a bar bipod on the front that folded up when not needed. Add a bar rear sight aligned carefully. If the sight was off, the gun was useless. Fabricated trigger assembly. This was the hardest part. The aircraft gun's electrical firing system had to be adapted to work with a mechanical trigger. Solder wires. Test the circuit. Make sure it fired reliably. Build a box magazine that held a 100-round belt of .30-06 ammunition. The magazine had to feed smoothly. Belt-fed weapons jam if the ammunition does not feed correctly. Paint the whole thing in camouflage colors to make it look intentional and professional. The finished Stingers weighed 23 pounds without ammunition. Add a 100-round belt, and you were at 25 pounds total, about 20s. 5% lighter than the M1919A6 with ammunition. The rate of fire was 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, depending on the specific gun. All of them were dramatically faster than the M1919's 400 rounds per minute. 3 times faster meant 3 times the suppressive effect on enemy positions. It meant you could put more rounds on target in the critical first few seconds of contact. Those first few seconds determined whether an assault succeeded or failed. If the enemy could shoot back immediately, the assault stalled. If the enemy had to take cover, the assault could close. The Stinger forced the enemy to take cover. Grevich finished all 6 Stingers in January 1945. Some sources say finishing touches were done aboard ship as the 5th Division sailed toward Iwo Jima. 5 Stingers were assigned to G Company 28th Marines. 1 went to each of the 3 rifle platoons, 1 to the demolition section. 1 carried by Grevich himself. He built the weapons. He would carry 1 into combat. The 6th Stinger went to a Marine from a different company. Corporal Tony Stein from Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines. Stein was not from Grevich's unit. The most likely explanation is that Stein helped build them. Tony Stein had been born on September 30th, 1921 in Dayton, Ohio. His parents were Steve and Rose Stein, immigrants from Erdevik in Austria-Hungary. The town is now in Serbia. They were German-speaking Jews who emigrated to America in the early 20th century to escape rising anti-Semitism in Europe. Stein grew up in Dayton. He dropped out of Kaiser High School during his freshman year. It was the Great Depression. His family needed income. Stein went to work. He became a toolmaker at the Delco Products division of General Motors in Dayton. Toolmaking required precision, understanding how metal worked, how to shape it, how to join pieces together, how to make things that functioned reliably under stress. These were exactly the skills needed to build Stingers. When the United States entered World War II, Stein enlisted in the Marine Corps. He signed up on September 22nd, 1942, 1 week before his 21st birthday. He completed recruit training at Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, then went through Marine parachute training at Camp Gillespie. Stein joined the 3rd Parachute Battalion, the same unit Grevich served with. Stein shipped to the Pacific and saw his first combat on Vela Lavella in the Solomon Islands, then Bougainville. On Bougainville, Stein earned a reputation. He was aggressive, skilled, fearless. He hunted Japanese snipers. During one operation, he killed 5 Japanese snipers in a single day. His fellow Marines started calling him the Sniper Exterminator. When the Paramarines disbanded in February 1944, Stein was reassigned to the 5th Marine Division just like way Grevich. Stein was promoted to corporal and assigned as assistant squad leader in Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Marines. Different battalion than Grevich, but they knew each other. They had served together in the Paramarines. They had both been on Bougainville. As a trained toolmaker with machine shop experience, Stein had exactly the skills Grevich needed. Metalwork, precision fitting, problem solving. It makes complete sense that Grevich asked Stein to help fabricate the Stingers. The trigger mechanisms required careful work. The stock attachments needed to be solid. Stein could do that work. In exchange, Stein got one of the 6 guns. Nobody filed paperwork on this arrangement. Nobody asked permission from regiment or division. 6 Marines were going to carry unauthorized weapons into combat. On February 19th, 1945, the 5th Marine Division loaded into landing craft and headed for the beaches of Iwo Jima. Among the 35,000 Marines in the assault force, 6 carried Stingers. On the morning of February 19th, Tony Stein waded ashore carrying his Stinger. The first waves hit the beach at 0902, 1 minute ahead of schedule. The volcanic sand on the beach was black, soft. Marines sank to their ankles with every step. For the first few minutes after landing, Japanese fire was light, sporadic, a few mortar rounds, some machine gun bursts. At 0915, every Japanese gun on the island opened fire simultaneously. Machine guns, mortars, artillery, rockets. Kuribayashi had waited. Let the beach fill with Marines. Let them think they were safe. Then kill as many as possible, as fast as possible. The beach became a killing ground. Explosions walked through the Marines. Machine gun fire came from positions that could not be seen. Men went down. Corpsmen rushed to help. Got hit themselves. Equipment burned. Amtraks exploded. Landing craft took hits and sank. Marines scattered, found cover behind anything available. Disabled vehicles, shell craters. The terraces where the soft sand gave way to harder ground. Stein's Company A was tasked with moving inland toward the base of Mount Suribachi. Suribachi dominated the southern end of the island, a 546-foot volcanic cone. Japanese observers on top could see everything on the beaches. Taking Suribachi was essential, but getting there meant crossing open ground under fire from positions that had been prepared for months. Concrete pillboxes, coconut log bunkers, spider holes, tunnels. Every approach was covered by multiple guns. The 28th Marines advanced toward Suribachi 1 meter at a time. Every piece of cover was precious. Every movement drew fire. Stein did something nobody had trained him to do and nobody had authorized. He stood up. He walked forward in the open carrying his stinger. He drew Japanese fire deliberately. This violated every tactical principle. You stayed low, used cover, minimized your silhouette. Stein ignored all of it. He stood upright in full view of Japanese positions. Japanese gunners saw a Marine standing exposed. Easy target. They shot at him. Stein used their muzzle flashes to locate their positions. Then he opened fire. The Stinger fired 1,500 rounds per minute, 25 rounds per second. That much firepower from one weapon made Japanese soldiers duck. They got their heads down. They stopped shooting long enough to not get shot. Those few seconds were enough. While Stein provided covering fire, the rest of his platoon moved. They advanced from cover to cover, got closer to Japanese positions. Demolition Marines placed satchel charges against bunker walls. Flamethrower operators burned out firing ports. Riflemen covered the flanks. The system worked because Stein's Stinger gave them the time and space to make it work. Stein attacked one position after another. Stand in the open. Draw fire. Identify the source. Suppress it with the Stinger. Let his squad assault with demolitions and flamethrowers. Move to the next position. Repeat. The Stinger burned through ammunition at an astonishing rate. A 100-round belt lasted about 4 seconds at full cyclic rate. Stein could not carry enough ammunition to sustain the fight for long. He needed constant resupply. The solution was simple but dangerous. Run back to the beach, get more ammunition, run back to the fight. Stein made that run 8 times during D-Day. Each trip was 600 meters across open ground under constant mortar and artillery fire. Japanese gunners on Suribachi could see the beach clearly. They dropped mortars and artillery on the landing zones continuously. Each time he ran to the beach, he found a wounded Marine, helped him walk if he could walk, carried him if he could not, got him to the aid station, loaded up with ammunition boxes, ran back to the fight. 100 rounds of 30-06 ammunition in a linked belt with metal box weighs about 20 pounds. Stein carried multiple boxes, probably 3 or 4 boxes per trip. That is 60 to 80 pounds of ammunition, plus his Stinger, plus his personal gear, running through soft volcanic sand, under fire. 8 times. On one of those runs, a Japanese bullet hit his Stinger. The round struck the gun and knocked it out of his hands. Stein picked it up, checked it. The gun still functioned. Minor damage. He kept going. Later in the day, it happened again. Another bullet hit the gun hard enough to knock it from his hands. Same result. Check it. Still works. Keep going. Somewhere during the day, Stein removed his helmet and shoes. The official Medal of Honor citation says shoes. The helmet was heavy and reduced hearing. The shoes were heavy and slowed him down in the volcanic sand. Stein decided speed was more important than protection. He ran back and forth across that beach 8 times in socks or barefoot, carrying wounded Marines and ammunition, while Japanese shells exploded around him. By the end of D-Day, Stein had personally killed 20 enemy soldiers according to his Medal of Honor citation. That number refers to confirmed kills of individual Japanese soldiers. The actual number of enemy casualties resulting from Stein's actions was certainly higher. Multiple pillboxes with multiple defenders in each. Marines assaulting behind his covering fire. What mattered more than the body count was the tactical effect. Stein's Stinger gave his platoon the suppressive fire they needed to assault fortified positions without taking catastrophic casualties. Marines could move while Japanese gunners were forced to take cover. That mobility was the difference between success and failure. Other Marines saw this. Company A's advance was faster and less costly than units using standard weapons. By nightfall on D-Day, every Marine in the 28th Regiment knew about the Stinger. The other 5 Stingers were doing similar work. 3 rifle platoons in G Company had them. The demolition section in G Company had 1. Grevich had 1. These weapons were all concentrated in the 28th Marines attacking Mount Suribachi. The Stingers helped reduce the cost of taking the mountain. High rate of fire meant better suppression. Better suppression meant demolition teams and flamethrower operators could get close enough to destroy positions. Flamethrowers were the most effective weapon against Japanese fortifications, but flamethrower operators had to get within 20 meters to be effective. 20 meters from a machine gun position was suicide unless someone was providing enough covering fire to keep the enemy suppressed. The Stingers did that job better than any other weapon the Marines had. Over the next 4 days, from February 19th through February 23rd, The 28th Marines fought their way up Mount Suribachi. Every meter caused casualties. Every position had to be reduced individually with demolitions and flamethrowers. The Marines used Bangalore torpedoes to blow holes in defensive lines, satchel charges to destroy bunkers, flamethrowers to burn out cave positions, grenades to clear tunnels, bayonets and rifle butts for close combat when Japanese soldiers emerged from positions to fight hand to hand rather than burn alive. It was brutal, exhausting, terrifying, but effective. The 28th Marines took Suribachi one position at a time. On February 23, 1945, a patrol from Company E, 28th Marines, reached the summit of Mount Suribachi. The patrol was led by First Lieutenant Harold Schreer. They carried a small American flag. The flag was from a landing ship, 54 inches by 28 inches. At approximately 10:30 hours, they raised the flag on a piece of pipe. Marines across the southern end of the island saw it. Ships offshore saw it. A cheer went up. The first piece of Japanese soil had been captured. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal was on the beach, observing the battle. He saw the flag go up. He decided he wanted that flag as a souvenir. Someone had the sense to tell Forrestal that the Marines who had just fought up that mountain might want to keep their flag. A solution was proposed. Send up a second, larger flag. Raise it for a proper ceremony. Forrestal could have the first flag. A second patrol went up Suribachi later that day. They carried a larger flag, 96 inches by 56 inches. This flag came from LST 923. The patrol included 6 men. Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal was also on the summit. He had climbed up hoping to photograph the flag raising, but thought he had missed it. When he arrived, the first flag was already up. Then he learned a second flag was being raised. The 6 men raising the second flag were Corporal Harold Schultz, Corporal Harold Keller, Private First Class Ira Hayes, Private First Class Franklin Sousley, Sergeant Michael Strenk, and Corporal Harlan Block. As they raised the flag, Rosenthal captured the moment on film. He shot the photograph at 1/400th of a second. He almost missed it. He had to swing his camera up quickly to catch the flag going up. The photograph became the most famous image of World War II. It appeared on the front pages of newspapers across America. It became a symbol of American determination and sacrifice. The photograph was later used as the model for the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. Tony Stein participated in the fight for Mount Suribachi. He was there for the advance from the beach to the base of the mountain. He provided covering fire for assaults on Japanese positions around the slopes, but he was not part of the flag-raising patrols. During the fighting around Suribachi, Stein was wounded. The wounds were not life-threatening, but severe enough to require evacuation. He was taken to a hospital ship offshore for treatment. His war on Iwo Jima should have been over. While Stein recovered on the hospital ship, the 28th Marines moved north up the west coast of Iwo Jima. The terrain there was different than around Suribachi. Broken volcanic rock, ravines, cliffs, natural caves reinforced with concrete and steel. The Japanese had turned the entire northern plateau into a fortress. Every ridge was a defensive line. Every ravine was a killing ground. Every cave was a strong point. The Marines advanced by meters. Casualties mounted steadily, men killed, men wounded, men evacuated for combat fatigue. The 28th Marines, like every unit on Iwo Jima, were being ground down by attrition. On March 1st, 1945, 10 days after the initial landing, the 28th Marines were fighting near Hill 362A. The hill was in the northwestern sector of the island. The fighting there was as bad as anything at Suribachi. Worse, in some ways. More caves, more tunnels, better fields of fire. Stein was on the hospital ship when he heard about it. His unit was in heavy contact. Men he had trained with were dying. Men he had fought beside on Bougainville and during the landing were in a fight for their lives. Stein made a decision. He left the hospital ship. Nobody authorized it. Nobody approved it. He just left. Returned to Iwo Jima, went back to his unit, rejoined Company A on the front lines. His wounds were not fully healed. Medical personnel would have kept him on the ship for days, if not weeks. Stein did not care. His Marines were fighting. He was going to fight with them. On the morning of March 1st, 1945, Company A was pinned down by a Japanese machine gun position. The position was well concealed in broken ground. Every time the Marines tried to advance, the machine gun opened fire and drove them back. Men were getting hit. The advance was stalled. Nobody could locate the exact position of the gun. Stein volunteered to lead a patrol to find and destroy the machine gun emplacement. 19 Marines went with him. They were going to reconnoiter the area, find the gun, call in support, assault if possible. It was a dangerous mission. The terrain favored the defenders. Broken volcanic rock provided good cover for hidden positions. Japanese snipers were active throughout the sector. They had learned to target Marines who looked like leaders. Stein was a corporal, squad leader. He would be a target. The patrol moved out, advancing carefully through the broken ground, looking for the machine gun position. Japanese snipers were watching, waiting for targets. One of them had a clear shot at Stein. At some point during the patrol, a single rifle shot. The round hit Stein in the head. He died instantly. It was March 1st, 1945. Stein had been in combat for 16 months, Vella Lavella, Bougainville, Iwo Jima. He had killed dozens of enemy soldiers, destroyed multiple fortified positions, made 8 resupply runs under fire on D-Day while evacuating wounded Marines, fought up Mount Suribachi, recovered from wounds, and returned to the fight without authorization. Volunteered for a dangerous patrol when his unit needed someone to lead. He was 23 years old. He had been married for less than a year. His widow was Joan Stomminger. She was 24 years old. They had known each other in Dayton before the war, married before Stein deployed to the Pacific. She waited for him while he fought on 3 islands, received letters when mail came through, worried every day. On March 1st, 1945, she became a widow. She would not learn about it for weeks. The telegram would arrive eventually. Joan would read that her husband had been killed in action on Iwo Jima. She would receive his personal effects, his wedding ring, whatever letters or photographs he had carried, and eventually she would receive his Medal of Honor. Tony Stein's Medal of Honor was presented to his widow Joan on February 19, 1946, exactly 1 year after he landed on Iwo Jima. The ceremony took place in the office of Ohio Governor Frank Lausch in Columbus. Admiral Richard Connolly presented the medal. He had been commander of a naval task group at Iwo Jima. He had seen the battle from offshore. Now he stood in the governor's office and read the citation. It described Stein's actions on February 19, 1945. His use of the personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, his rapid covering fire that enabled his platoon to move into position, his standing upright to draw enemy fire so he could locate hostile gun positions, his destruction of Japanese fortifications, his killing of 20 enemy soldiers, his 8 trips to the beach for ammunition, his carrying or assisting wounded Marines each time, his removal of helmet and shoes to expedite his movements, his weapon being shot from his hands twice, his cool courage under merciless fire, his gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The citation made no mention of where the weapon came from, did not mention Sergeant Mel Grevich or Private First Class John Little, did not mention the months of work building the Stingers. The official paperwork called it a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon and left everything else unstated. Rose Stein was at the ceremony, Tony's mother. She stood with Joan and watched Admiral Connolly present the medal. She cried. Her son had died a hero. The medal was proof of his courage. But it did not bring him back. Stein was initially buried in the 5th Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima. The cemetery was on the western coast of the island. Rows of white crosses, thousands of them. The cemetery was formally dedicated on March 21st, 1945, while fighting was still ongoing in the northern part of the island. Stein's grave was in Plot 5, Row 6, Grave 1107. After the war, families were given a choice. Leave their loved one buried on Iwo Jima or bring them home. Most families chose to bring them home. Stein's body was exhumed and returned to the United States. On December 17, 1948, 3.5 years after his death, Tony Stein was buried with full military honors at Calvary Cemetery in Dayton, Ohio. He was home. His family could visit his grave. His widow could bring flowers. The community could remember. Calvary Cemetery is a Catholic cemetery. Many veterans are buried there. Stein's grave is marked with a military headstone, name, rank, unit, Medal of Honor recipient, dates of birth and death. September 30th, 1921 to March 1st, 1945. 23 years, not enough time, but more impact than many people achieve in a full lifetime. The stinger he carried on Iwo Jima is gone, lost like the other 5, probably destroyed in the chaos of post-battle cleanup, or perhaps kept by someone as a souvenir and later discarded or forgotten. The weapon that helped change Marine Corps, tactics, and saved lives does not exist anymore, but its influence does. The lessons learned from the Stingers shaped how the Marine Corps thought about squad automatic weapons, lighter, faster, more portable. That evolution eventually led to the M60 machine gun adopted in 1957, and later to the M240, every generation learning from the previous one. The 5 other Marines who carried Stingers on Iwo Jima had different outcomes. Sergeant Mel Grevich survived the battle. He carried his Stinger through 36 days of continuous combat. He fought from the beach landing on February 19th through the final securing of the island on March 26th. The 5th Marine Division suffered 2,482 killed in action, 19 missing in action, and 6,218 wounded in action during the battle. Total casualties of 8,719. That was the highest casualty rate of any division on Iwo Jima. Grevich made it through. He survived where thousands did not. After Iwo Jima, the 5th Division returned to Hawaii. They reestablished Camp Tarawa. They began preparing for the next operation, the invasion of Japan. In August 1945, Japan surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The invasion of Japan was canceled, Grevich went home. He did not talk much about the stingers after the war. It was a wartime improvisation. It worked. That was enough. Private First Class John Little also survived the war. He returned to civilian life, never spoke publicly about his role in building the stingers. Years later, a historian researching the weapons found Little and asked him about the details. Little provided what information he could. He said he did not remember exactly where they got the parts or how they managed to complete the work without official authorization. That was probably true. Some things were better left unspecified. Private William Colby, who had built the first crude modification on Bougainville that inspired Grevich, survived the war. His role in starting the concept was largely forgotten. The stingers became associated with Grevich and Stein because they used them on Iwo Jima. Bougainville was earlier, less famous. Colby's contribution was overshadowed by events that came later. But without Colby's initial attempt to adapt the ANM2 for ground use, Grevich might never have thought to refine the concept. After the battle, Marine Corps ordnance officers examined the stingers, or tried to. Most of the 6 guns were lost, probably destroyed in combat. Some may have been damaged beyond repair. Some may have been lost in the chaos of post-battle operations. When the war ended in August 1945, the Pacific was full of discarded military equipment. Weapons that were no longer needed got dumped, burned, buried, thrown off ships into the ocean. The military demobilized rapidly. Millions of men went home. Bases closed. Equipment was surplused or destroyed. Nobody had time to carefully inventory every non-standard weapon. The stingers were never in the supply system. They had no serial numbers, no property books tracking them. When the war ended, they disappeared. Ordnance officers who knew about them wrote reports. The concept was sound. A lightweight machine gun with very high rate of fire was useful for assault troops. The reports recommended that similar weapons should be developed and issued. One report suggested that one stinger should replace 1 bar in each rifle squad, give squads more suppressive firepower without adding weight. The recommendation was never implemented. The war ended before it could be acted upon. The Marine Corps demobilized, development programs were canceled, budgets were cut. There was no time and no money to develop new weapons when millions of existing weapons were being surplused. But the idea did not die. The Marine Corps recognized that the M1919A6 was inadequate, too heavy, too slow. Squad automatic weapons needed to be lighter and faster. That recognition came directly from combat experience. Marines who had carried the M1919A6 knew its limitations. Marines who had seen the stingers in action knew what was possible. That knowledge influenced thinking about future weapons. The Marine Corps participated in development programs for new machine guns in the 1950s. Those programs eventually led to adoption of the M60 machine gun. The M60 was adopted in 1957 and entered service in 1958. It weighed 23 pounds, the same as a Stinger. It fired 7.62 millimeter NATO rounds at 550 rounds per minute, faster than the M1919, not as fast as the Stinger, but more controllable for sustained fire. It was belt-fed, lighter than the M1919A6, more portable. Gave rifle squads the suppressive firepower they needed. The M60 served for decades in Vietnam and later in the Gulf War. It was eventually replaced by the M240 Bravo, which entered service in the 1990s. The M240 weighs 27.6 pounds and fires at 650 rounds per minute. In 2017, the Canadian Historical Arms Museum built a replica Stinger for a television documentary. The project took 3 months. Gunsmiths used historical photographs and descriptions to recreate the weapon as accurately as possible. They sourced an actual ANM2 aircraft machine gun, found period-correct parts from M1 Garand rifles and bars, fabricated the trigger mechanism based on descriptions from veterans, built the ammunition box, assembled everything. The finished replica looked right. It weighed right. They fired it. The rate of fire was as advertised, 1,500 rounds per minute. The weapon was controllable despite the high cyclic rate. Then the bipod and stock made it stable. The recoil was manageable. Burst firing was effective. The replica proved that the Stingers were not lucky accidents or exaggerated war stories. They were functional weapons that solved a real tactical problem. The Canadian Historical Arms Museum still has the replica. It is the only known Stinger in existence anywhere in the world. Another replica was built for the movie Flags of Our Fathers, directed by Clint Eastwood. The film told the story of the Iwo Jima flag raising and the lives of the men in the photograph. The production company hired Giet Manufacturing Incorporated to build a functioning Stinger for use in the film. They built it. It worked. But the scene showing the Stinger was cut from the final film. Editorial decisions during post-production. The film focused on the flag raisers and their stories. The Stinger subplot did not fit. The replica weapon still exists. 2 replicas total in the world. Both built decades after the war. The original 6 are gone forever. The Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, stands near the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. The memorial depicts the second flag raising on Mount Suribachi, 6 bronze figures raising the flag. The monument is 78 feet tall. The figures are 32 feet tall. The flagpole is 60 feet. The sculptor was Felix de Weldon. He created the memorial based on Joe Rosenthal's photograph. Every detail was carefully researched. The angles of the figures, the positions of their hands, the folds in their uniforms. The memorial was dedicated on November 10th, 1954. Every year, thousands of people visit the memorial. Most know the story of the flag raising. The photograph is iconic. The memorial is impressive. Very few visitors know the story of the Stingers, the weapons that helped Marines fight their way up that mountain. The flag raising was symbolic. It represented American resolve and Marine Corps courage and sacrifice. The Stingers were functional. They represented American ingenuity and Marine Corps adaptability and innovation. Both matter. Symbols inspire. But tools win battles. At the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, Tony Stein's Medal of Honor is on display. The exhibit includes his photograph and uniform, his citation text, a brief description of his actions on Iwo Jima. The display does not include a Stinger. None exist to display. Visitors see the Medal of Honor. They read about Stein's heroism. They see he carried a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon. Most visitors probably wonder what that means. The language is bureaucratic, vague. It does not convey the reality. The reality was that Stein and 5 other Marines carried weapons that should not have existed. Weapons built by hand from salvaged parts. Weapons never officially approved or issued. Weapons that violated supply regulations and armament standards. Weapons that saved lives. The black sand beaches of Iwo Jima are still there. The island is now called Yoto. The Japanese government controls access. Only official delegations are allowed to visit for annual memorial ceremonies. The beaches where Marines landed are unchanged. Black volcanic sand, steep terraces. The terrain that made the landing so difficult. Mount Suribachi still dominates the southern end of the island. You can still see the summit from the beach, the same view the Marines had 80 years ago. The bunkers and tunnels remain. Rusting metal, crumbling concrete, collapsed cave entrances. Silent reminders of a battle that killed 7,000 Americans and 21,000 Japanese in 36 days. The island is quiet now. No gunfire, no explosions, no screaming. Just wind and waves and the occasional cry of seabirds. The Marines who fought there are mostly gone. Tony Stein died in 1945 at age 23. The survivors who made it home are now over 90 years old if they are still alive. A few remain. Their numbers shrink every year. Soon there will be none. The Stingers are gone. The men who built them are gone or nearly gone. What remains is the lesson. Innovation in war does not come from headquarters. It does not come from planning committees or engineering departments. It comes from people who are close enough to the problem to understand exactly what is wrong. People who are creative enough to imagine a solution using whatever materials are available. People who are brave enough to try that solution even when it violates regulations. Mel Grevich saw that his machine guns were inadequate. He remembered a weapon he had built on Bougainville. He rebuilt it. He got approval from commanders who were smart enough to encourage initiative instead of enforcing regulations. Tony Stein had the skills to help fabricate the weapons. He got one of the 6 guns. He used it to kill enemy soldiers and save Marine lives. If this story connected with you, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten history from World War II. Subscribe to see more stories about the innovation and courage that defined the Pacific War. Each account reveals truths that official records often overlook. Comment below to let us know where you are watching from and what you think about this story. Our community includes veterans, active service members, historians, and anyone who appreciates the ingenuity of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.